My name's Jerome Partington. Originally I'm from England, and for the last 10 years I've worked at JazzMax, a large architecture design practice in New Zealand, and I'm the sustainability manager. And my job is to promote and encourage our designers and clients to build greater levels of sustainability, and in the way that our buildings work and perform and what they give back to the world. So I've always been passionate about that, and a lot of experience in construction and education and design and building. And this morning I'm going to talk about what success looks like in terms of sustainability, and when we're talking about buildings and the built environment. So the picture that you can see on the screen there, that's a barn in Wales, and that was the first ever project that I worked on. And when I got my hands on that project, it's actually my best friend's house, when I got my hands on that project, the building was already 500 years old at least. And over time it had been improved and changed and altered and upgraded. So when I collaborated with my friend to turn this into his house, we made it a super insulated, a very efficient, targeted energy, water, health. And just a couple of years ago, you can just see it on the top, he's put 6 kilowatts of solar electric panels on the roof. Now Wales is a pretty cloudy, cold place in winter time, and this house through the year delivers twice as much energy, electricity, as he uses. And so there's a bit of a sense there that sustainability is actually not about right now, right this second. It's actually about the fact that, people live on this planet over a long period of time, over a continuum, and the decisions that we make now, although they seem to be very relevant to right now, they're actually having a big impact and a big implication on what's happening for future generations. And often we ignore what's come before us as well. So we're very much living in the moment in a world that we created that we think is great, but actually it has a lot of problems. So this is my slide, my picture that I use to sort of describe what I see as the big global problem that we're facing. We've got increasing population on the planet, and that's significant. Even in my lifetime, the population on planet Earth has doubled from 3.5 billion people to 7 billion people. That's 7 billion more people, 3.5 billion more people that want to drive cars, have a warm house, have computers and toys, and aspire to a great lifestyle. And because there's more people, we want more stuff. We've moved into a more consumer world. And one of the problems with that consumer world is that we get stuff out of the ground, we make stuff with it, we make products, we make buildings, and then when we finish with them, we throw them away. And part of that process actually releases a whole lot of toxicity and pollution. The other side of the coin is that sitting at the back of this picture is a picture of our planet Earth. And the message there is that actually there is one planet, and it's absolutely critical to our well-being, because that planet delivers fresh air, fresh water, food, well-being, all those things that we actually rely on, but we don't really give a lot of thought and attention to. And the problem is that as there's more people, more buildings, we're using up that planet, we're building on it, we're mining it, we're cutting it down, we're putting pollution out there and toxicity, which stops the planet being able to function and support life. So we're reaching a crisis point. In fact, for some parts of the planet, we're past the crisis point. Climate change is now well underway, and we're experiencing global warming, sea level rises, huge storms like we've just had in the US. And as humans, actually, we're starting to realize that really we're vulnerable to this planet that we've always kind of ignored and we don't want to engage with. Yet really our future relies on being aligned with the health of the planet. If the planet's healthy, and we support that healthiness and that well-being, then we can be healthy as well. It's a sort of a mutually dependent situation. So one of the things is that with our lifestyles and our world, and we look around and it's all sort of human-made, and it's all in our own image, if you like, it all looks great, it all looks fantastic, and we're busy and we're working and we're making money and we're growing the economy, but at the same time, we're using up that planet, we're eating up the resources of the planet, we're producing waste and pollution, and actually really fundamentally we're relying on cheap fossil fuels like oil and stuff, which are here for a very limited time. So this picture is about, actually, if we want a different future, we actually have to consciously decide that we're going to go for that different future. It's not about just doing things a little bit better, it's not about just drifting along because it feels all right. It's actually about saying, no, we've got to do things in a different way, because what we're doing now is a disaster for humans and people and the planet. So I suppose that's really about just consciously saying, no, I want to go in this direction rather than that direction. There's actually a Chinese proverb that I really like that says, if you walk in that direction, you'll get there. And that's up to us. Which direction do we want to walk in? So there's been a lot of work around green buildings and energy efficient buildings and using less resources. And that's been over the last 20 years. And in that time, the average house has actually got twice as big. So in the early 1980s, the average house in New Zealand was maybe 120 square meters, 130 square meters. Most new houses are 260 square meters. And at the same time, our families have got smaller. So we're taking twice as much resources to build our houses, then they take twice as much or even more energy to run them, to make them feel comfortable. So we're just on this hiding to nowhere, really. We've kind of got all our value systems out of kilter. So if we want to do the right thing, if we want to go in the right direction, then we need to understand what that destination is that we want to get to. And the Living Building Challenge is like a green building tool. And I will say very much that it is a challenge. It's not an easy destination to get to, because it's asking us to be really honest and transparent with the way that we interact with the world and what sort of buildings and neighborhoods and communities we build. It came out of the Pacific Northwest, and it aims to define where we need to get to, and it makes the measure of success nature. If the buildings that we're designing work like nature or are aligned with nature, then that building is going to be successful. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. It's unlike a lot of green building tools. You actually have to build the building, design it, you have to build it, and then you have to live in it. And then you can check whether you've actually achieved what you set out to do. Whereas a lot of green buildings, you know, they just have good intentions and actually they don't behave very well at the end of the day. So there are 7 petals to a living building. So a living building is based on the metaphor of a flower, that a flower grows in one particular place. It harvests its energy from the sky. It harvests the water that it needs, either from the sky or from the ground. It doesn't produce any waste or toxic waste. It's just part of the natural system. And of course they're beautiful as well. We love flowers, we like to look at them. And insects and bees like flowers as well. You know, they're good, they're part of the natural system. So I'm not going to go into a lot of depth today, but just to give you a taster with it. So if you want to build a living building, you can't build it, you have to build it in the city on ground or what's called brown or greyfield sites. You can't build them out in the forest. And you can't build them on farmland, because we need that farmland for food. The only time you can is if you're building a farm or something to do with food, but otherwise you have to build it where people are living already. And you actually have to grow some portion of your food in a living building. And if you're right in the city, that's just a little bit. But if you're right out in the sticks, maybe up to 50 or 60% of the food for the family or the community has to be grown on site. And the living buildings have to promote car-free living. So if you just build a massive housing estate and there's no workspace, there's no offices, there's no shops, that would not meet the Living Building Challenge. You actually have to do a mixture, and that's so that people don't have to drive everywhere, so that you can walk from your home to your workplace or to the shops or to the library. So it's really strongly about building communities and the way that we design our neighbourhoods. Water's fairly simple. You have to harvest all your own water from the site, from the roof or from the ground. And you also have to treat all your sewage water, your black water, or you have to make sure that all the stormwater from your site, so the runoff from roads and from the buildings, is all cleaned up before it's allowed to go back into the natural system. So we have to be responsible for all the flows onto the site and off the site. And actually it's not such a difficult thing to do, as I'll tell you about later. Net zero energy is very simple. At the end of the year, your energy bill has to say zero kilowatt hours. And for designers, what that does is make us design the most efficient buildings we can possibly think of. And we're designing buildings now that use 80% less energy than a normal building. So that's a pretty good improvement. And then the rest of that energy is put on the roof through solar panels or through windmills or other technologies. Around health, They test the building to check that there are no toxic gases gassing off from your carpets, your furniture, your paints. So as designers, we have to be very careful what we're putting into these buildings in the first place. Every room has to have an opening window. I know it sounds a bit silly really, doesn't it? But quite basic. You know, a few years back we had power cuts in Auckland and whole office blocks were sent home because the windows couldn't be opened, the air conditioning wasn't working and people were suffocating effectively. And you also have to build elements in that show how we love nature, we love natural forms of trees and plants and water flow and streams. You have to express that in the design of the building so that the building reflects that kind of feeling, our natural affinity to nature. So there's 3 more petals: materials, beauty and equity. Materials are actually quite tricky. You're not allowed any toxic materials in your building. And you would be amazed what gets built into buildings these days. Flame retardants that are hormone disruptors, many carcinogens, all sorts of really terrible things. It's just like bog standard, we use them, put them into our buildings. And the Living Building Challenge tool says, nah, end of it. You're not allowed to put any heavy metals, health disruptors or carcinogen materials in your building. You also have to plan for the building's life. So you have to know what's going to happen to every material in the building, so at the end of the building's life the building can be taken apart and you can reuse all those elements. It doesn't go to landfill. We're not building something that's like disposable. This is something that has value right the way through. A few other bits and pieces that it has to be built to a human scale. So it just, you know, in terms of, this is a really high space. We like spaces that are appropriate for us, or when we look at a building, you know, a 30-story glass box doesn't have much of a human scale about it. So whereas a porch on the front of a house shows you where the front door is and you start to read the environment and it feels like a good place to be. Fully accessible to all people, and you also have to open your building up once a year to the public so that everybody can come in and see how good it is. And for instance, if you were building on a beach or by a river, if you want to certify as a living building, you're not allowed to close that walkway off. You have to allow that to be open so that everybody can have access to that beautiful place, etc. So they're not into gated communities and excluding people. It's about full access. And of course it has to be beautiful and it has to be inspiring and has to show people how you achieved it. So just in terms of how sustainable is it or how green is it? Over on the left hand side of this diagram, so you can see the middle line, we've got negative below the line, that's the red impacts, and above the line is green. That's doing good for the planet. So a building code building is right over on the left hand side. You build to code, you're basically trying to avoid going to jail. You're going to avoid prison because you're not breaking the law. You're doing the minimum you possibly can to make sure your building doesn't fall down and doesn't leak. And then we get into sort of more green buildings. That's about doing less harm, a little bit less energy used, a little bit less water, a little bit more health. Living buildings are sitting right over on the right hand side. They're buildings that give back more than they take. More energy, more water, more health, more benefit to the planet. So it's a different way of thinking about buildings and how we're going to approach either renewing our buildings in the future or how we're going to build new ones. So this is a building in Vancouver. This is a visitor centre. So it is a bit of an iconic building. It's a special building to begin with. And it's in like a 10-hectare botanical garden in the middle of the city. And so now everybody comes through this building on their way in, so where they get their tickets and get a cup of coffee and stuff. But it's been designed as a living building. And the plan and the section of the building is based on an orchid flower. And it generates all its own energy, and it partly does that by collecting heat in summer and storing it underground so that in wintertime it can take that heat back out and warm the building. The pond you're looking at is where the wastewater has been treated, and that's the final treatment pool. Doesn't smell, it's actually just becomes a beautiful feature in front of the building. All the wood is sustainable. It's got the big cone in the middle where it naturally draws air through the space and it rises out of the cone, so it naturally ventilates. And it's got walls made out of earth, which you can see in front of you. And all the timber is, the climate change impacts is hitting the Pacific Northwest. All their pine is dying because it doesn't get cold enough in winter to kill off the pests. So all these buildings are being built using this dead pine. This is an interesting building as well. This is for a large educational, it's like a 200-hectare educational camp for students in America. And they come to, there's like 80 buildings, they come here, they stay for a week or 2 weeks, they go on courses, and it's like summer education time. And this is one of their central pieces of infrastructure. And they've got these large tanks full of water and all these plants growing in there. It's sort of designed like a giant greenhouse almost. And they also run classes in there, and they, in terms of yoga, and they also do their induction. People arriving to the site are given a tour of this building. So any thoughts as to what this building's function is? Any ideas? No? So this is the sewage treatment plant for the whole camp. So they're taking all the wastewater from the toilets, the route that goes through the plants, the roots of the plants take all the nutrients out and kill all the bacteria, and then the water's good to be pumped back to the toilets and used again. So they just keep recirculating the water on site. And of course it doesn't smell and it's beautiful, so people are in there doing their yoga classes and they're really enjoying it. This is interesting, this is like a creche building. It's at another university in Vancouver, and designed to meet the Living Building Challenge. Net zero water, net zero energy, beautiful, no toxic materials, good for children, good for people. The interesting thing about this is that the whole university is making its campus into a living campus. And this was their first living building, and they put the expression of interest out. They said, hey, we've got a standard budget for a normal building, but we want a Living Building Challenge building, so who wants the job? And so they've built this for a normal budget, which is quite amazing. This building is just being finished now as we speak, and it's a 6-story commercial building. It's an office building, and it's got this giant roof. Now this building's in Seattle, where 6 months of the year you have cloud, you have rain, it's grey, it's foggy, it's misty. There is no solar energy. Yet that roof is big enough to run 6 floors of the office and provide enough energy throughout the year. And they have essentially, they've saved every single bit of energy. The lights aren't on during the day because they've got really good daylighting. The computers are all little laptops and tablets, so that they don't have all the energy used in your PCs, and everything's designed to be really efficient. And obviously doing net zero water in a city block where you've got no land is quite tricky. So this building actually has 6-story composting toilets, and as you use the toilet, there's a tiny flush, takes it down to the basement, and then once a year you basically empty these blue containers, and that's, it's compost. It goes out onto the park. It's also built out of timber, so that it's capturing more carbon in the structure of the building than it's been used to build the building. So it becomes a carbon sink, and so it contributes positively to, it's helping to prevent climate change. This building is sort of like, this is the be-all building. This is the most sustainable building on the planet right now. It's a research building at a university, and it's designed to understand how people can behave sustainably and how the building interacts with that, and so they can start testing and looking at the performance of both people and the building, how we work together. Because we can design really efficient, really sustainable buildings, but if people go in and just behave normally, it's going to blow it. If you take your normal computer into a building, it's going to blow the energy load at the end of the year, so we've got to think about how we use buildings in different ways. But again, it's got a little plant-based water treatment system for the sewage. It's generating all its own energy. It's actually scavenging energy from the building next door, all this waste heat, and using it in its own building, and then re-exporting it. So this building is actually what we call restorative. It's giving back more energy than it's producing more energy than it needs. It's producing 3 kinds of water more than it needs, which recharges the aquifer and the neighbouring greenhouses. It sequesters more carbon than it took to build the building, and it's healthier than any other building on this planet if you're going to work in it. There's some 40 PhD students in there. And that's a bit of a diagram that starts to show you, these are the sort of diagrams that we are using to describe how these buildings perform. They start to look like, if you mapped natural systems, the buildings start to look like a natural building where it's harvesting water off the roof and storing it and using it for potable water, and then it's harvesting water off the green roof and cleaning it up through the biotanks. It's capturing energy from this building next door and storing it in the ground and taking it out later. It's capturing sunshine on the solar panels, and it's got a big lecture theatre in the middle. Now normally if we design a university, we don't have any windows and we don't have any fresh air in a lecture theatre. This building, this lecture theatre's got windows along the side and it's got fresh air in it. So just stepping back to where we are in New Zealand, and so what, are we doing anything? What level can we achieve? Now this is a recent school project that we built out in West Auckland called Avondale College, and $40 million project over 4 years, rebuilding nearly 100 classrooms and workstations, and it's huge, it's absolutely massive. And basically we said very clearly early on with the principal and the ministry that we wanted to do the most sustainable building possible. Anyway, just to say, we get less, when we do a rebuild of an existing school, we get 20% less money per square metre than a brand new school, because they're supposed to be green, they've got money for innovation and doing green stuff. So come last winter, unfortunately, because of the global financial crisis, the builder had bid very low on stage 2, he went bankrupt, did a big catch up, but this is stage 1, and we found out at the end of winter that the heating had not been connected to this building, and it had been used right the way through. So basically we've designed these classrooms here in Auckland not to need any heating, even though the engineers had designed it and put it in, it hadn't been connected. So there's a win. We basically could have built it even cheaper if we'd left the heating out of it. But I suppose what I'm saying to you is it is possible with good design, design buildings that will run really, really efficiently. We just have to want to do that. This is similarly, this is an office for a biotech company down in Hamilton, and we found it remarkably easy to get the net zero water. They've actually created a wetland system out the front of the building that's going to treat all the sewage waste from. It's also going to have an orchard on the other, separate, but on the other side of the green spot outside, and that also takes all their stormwater runoff from the roofs of the buildings. And these buildings are about 75% more efficient than your average New Zealand office. They've got lovely daylight, they're healthy, they're nice to be in, you can open a window if you want to, and they're just designed to be comfortable and energy efficient. And again, this was the same price as a normal office. We just decided to do it in a different way. And this is a building that we're working on right now. This is going to be the first certified living building in New Zealand, so we're designing it to meet the Living Building Challenge standard. And it is it's going to be the administrative H-quarters for the Tuhoi tribe down in the Uruweras. And there's a couple of floors of office, there's a cafe, and there's an archive room, and then the large space that you're looking at is going to be, it's basically their huge governance, where they have massive hui's meetings to decide how the tribe is going to take decisions and move forward. And it's been designed to achieve net zero energy, net zero water, no toxics. We're paying a premium for this building. It's probably costing 20% more than a normal building to meet all the, if you like, all the details of the Living Building Challenge. But at the same time, it's interesting because the Tuhoi, when we first talked to them, they were like, no, we love the Living Building Challenge. That's our value systems, and that's how we live and work, and that's how we will keep on living into the future. And they didn't want to certify. And then gradually, as we've worked through the design, they realized that they're going to be one of 150 projects worldwide that achieve this incredible standard, and they see it as something, a sort of a bit of a lesson back for New Zealand and to the rest of the world about how actually Maori have a lot to offer New Zealand in the way that we think about the world and our future. So that's my kind of talk for today about if deciding where we want to go to, setting really high standards for ourselves and really clear direction, and then knowing that even with lower budgets we can get a lot of the way there, and then if we really want to we can go all the way to a sustainable or restorative future. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that was good.